Welcome everyone to another CourseKey webinar. My name's Alex. I'm the content marketing specialist at CourseKey, and I'm joined today by Evan. He's an account executive, and the two of us are going to spend the next 25 to 30 minutes talking about how to improve communication in your blended and online programs, specifically career education programs. All right, if this will respond, we can go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, we're really going to split it up into a few different parts. We'll start with why communication is important, which seems very straightforward, but there are some nuances here that we want to explore. Next, we'll look at some of the methods that exist today in online and blended courses and kind of identify some areas of improvement that exist there. And the third thing is that we will look more in depth at some ways to improve communication in blended and online courses, specifically highlighting two tools and features that CourseKey offers. And the fourth part will be just the path forward and next steps. So before I forget, two quick housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded, so anyone who's registered will get a link sent to their email tomorrow, most likely, once we've uploaded the recording to YouTube. And number two is we have time for a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions at all, definitely feel free to submit those. There's a way to do that on your Zoom window. There's a Q&A function. So submit any questions that you have there, and we'll get to as many as we have time for at the end. On to the CourseKey introduction. Evan, you want to take a roll of this one?
Yeah, definitely. And so for those that may not be familiar, CourseKey is a career education software platform, but focused specifically on the career education space. So there's a lot of companies that fall into the EdTech category, but they're focused maybe on K through 12 or higher education, traditional four-year schools, community colleges, things like that. But our founders started to understand probably 7 or 8 years ago that there's some unique requirements put on career education schools, specifically clock hour programs and some credit hour programs as well. And so we're working with 200 different campuses nationwide. We're the only venture-backed company in this space. And what that's allowed us to do is to grow faster and respond quicker to customer requests in terms of where we need to go next and things they'd like to see, things that help them grow the business and improve student outcomes.
Yep, exactly. All right, so the first place where we're going to start today is why is communication important in the first place? And like I said, this seems like an obvious question, but there's definitely some answers here that we want to talk about. So Evan, I'll give a few reasons why I say it's important, and then you feel free to jump in. But when we talk about communication in this session, we're really talking about instructor to student communication and then student to student communication, so peer to peer. And of course, other than communicating the course material to the student and helping them learn and conveying directions and instructions and expectations, communication is really important because it's the foundation for meaningful connections between instructors and students. And those relationships and those meaningful connections are often huge motivating factors for students to persist through their course. Keeps them engaged in their learning and emotionally invested in their program, and really helps them see it through to the end. And not to mention everything going on with our current pandemic situation and COVID-19, communication is really important to communicate all the frequent changes that we've seen occur and the different protocols that students and instructors need to take, and that's excluding the communication that's necessary to support students through this transition. So right now, communication is really important, and in blended and online, it naturally drops. Evan, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I think specifically on the peer-to-peer side in terms of what I've got in mind, but I think one thing it's hard to quantify, but a big piece of student experience, career, kind of education outcomes, moving into the workforce, a lot of that is those peer-to-peer connections and sometimes instructor to student connections as well. But I think we've probably all seen this work in various aspects as we've been working and connections you make, people you know. But oftentimes that has a big effect on what the student ends up doing once they graduate, once they finish their program? What are their prospects look like for jobs and continued advancement? And I think a lot of that can potentially be lost with the remote learning situation. And if that's how you go through the entire program, you don't get the same opportunity to foster those relationships with your peers and then lean on that network once you're ready to start working, looking to enter the job force and things like that. So I think if we can find ways to recreate that digitally, I think it could be really powerful for a lot of students.
Yeah, definitely. So, like Evan just said, communication naturally is there are less opportunities, fewer opportunities in online and blended in comparison to on-ground courses, and that's just because we're not in the same physical space as students or with our instructor, and that means we're interacting not very often with each other during class, even in our synchronous courses, and we're definitely not interacting before and after class, like when you see someone you know in the hallway or even stop after class or wait after class to meet with your instructor to ask a question. So those opportunities are to be expected. They're much lower than in on-ground programs. And what we have seen with the existing methods of communication that are some of the popular ones is that they don't really help bridge the gap of communication as well as they could. And we're going to take a little deep dive into some of the popular methods that we've seen here. And we'll kind of go back and forth. I'll do the first one, then Evan you'll do the next one. So the first one that we've seen, aside from the integral Zoom communication where every student is in the session with their instructor, one of the existing methods of engagement and communication we've seen is breakout sessions. And while these are really good or well-intended and seem like they'd be good at connecting students with each other, there are some reasons why they're not as effective as they may seem. So I'll use an example from actually my little brother. His name's Nicky. He's a senior in high school, and he has been doing virtual classes this whole school year. And they do breakout sessions in their course. And he says it's really problematic because the instructor is not in the same session as the students are. So there's less accountability there. And his classmates either they don't have their video on or they're really not speaking as much. And if he feels obligated to try and goad them to participate and to engage with each other. But then once his efforts fall short, it's really his motivation drops and the whole session is kind of a dud there. So those sessions, while they're well intended, aren't really as effective with facilitating communication as we may think.
Posting on discussion boards is another big one, and I think we've seen this for quite a while. Some courses or programs have always required this, and sometimes it was taken more seriously than others by students. But some LMSs may include this, some do it better than others. But it's really probably one of the better ways that I think we could potentially foster more of that peer-to-peer communication and give those students voices to be able to communicate with each other. But it's just so fragmented at this point that the requirement is there, students treat it as that in a lot of cases, and so they make their single post and move on from the day, and it doesn't really ever foster the discussion. Oftentimes it's separate from a lot of the work they're doing on a regular basis. So there's certainly better ways to utilize that and make sure it's effective.
Agreed. So the third common example is email, and this is a really widespread or widely used method of communication. And I know that a lot of instructors will tell their students, hey, if you have any questions at all during the program, feel free to email me, and I'll get back to you when I can. But there's a lot of problems tied with email as well. So the first one is that we all know that inboxes can get cluttered, especially if the instructor is using their email address for things outside of school communication as well. Messages from students can get buried. They might have to wait 3 or 4 days before they even get a response from their instructor, and that just causes some fragmented communication. And along those same lines, it's not a live discussion. So when you send out an email, we really don't know what happens to it right away, unless you have some kind of tracking software on there. We don't know if the person has seen the email, if they've clicked into it, if they've read it. there's no feedback there unless someone actually responds to you for you to understand what's happened to your email. And then another thing we've seen is that email can be reserved for higher leverage situations. So some students may be hesitant to reach out to their instructor via email because they think, oh, this question isn't critical enough for to warrant an email or to warrant me reaching out to my instructor, which is not really the mindset that we want to foster in our programs. So email, while it's again well intended, has a few issues tied to it.
And then with the whole advent of COVID and this kind of forced blended online learning situation that everyone's found themselves in, I think a lot of schools probably had this in mind and maybe didn't have everything sorted out and were completely ready to go with it. So it's forced them to kind of rush into this. And there's been a lot of kind of additions of those point solutions. And while a lot of them do one or two things quite well, what ends up happening is creating kind of fragmented communication. So your coursework may be in one system, your ebook may be in another. They may take tests in a third system. The instructors may communicate with students one way, staff may communicate with them a different way. And so there's no consolidation in terms of where students are looking for this information and what kind of things do they need for the course? How do they ask questions? How do they know kind of where to go to get the help if they need it, to communicate with peers, instructors, staff, etc. So um, while a lot of these systems have kind of helped us all get up and running as we all moved home, moved online, there's got to be a better way to get all of that communication in one place so that they can actually use it to augment the coursework and to continue learning and make that a better experience for those students.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to bring up before we move on to the next section is in blended programs, especially, the program director might think, hey, our students are receiving some face-to-face interaction with their instructor. So that means we don't really have to worry too much about facilitating communication across the entire program. And while that does make sense, they have time with their instructor face-to-face. That's usually only half or maybe a little bit more, a little bit less than half of the program where they have that interaction. And if they don't have means of communications outside of that, then that means that there's a whole half of the course that has a lot of room for improvement there. And we want to make sure that we consider those students when they're not face-to-face with their instructor as well. All right, so in this section, we're going to move on to how we've seen some partner institutions really utilizing the tools and features that we offer to improve communication. But I'll take a step back and say, okay, we know going into this that blended and online programs, the communication is naturally less frequent. And we've seen now through a lot of the common methods of facilitating communication that those fall short of the mark and really leave a lot of room for improvement, which is how these tools that we're about to talk about came about, really, is identifying those gaps and really filling those with tools designed to kind of even out the communication across the board. And before we dive into that, I just want to explain that the tools that students are using are on a student app within CourseKey. So instead of using the phone as just having it not, sorry, instead of the phone being a distraction to students during their online portion, and really only taking 1 second for them to look at their phone and they're not focused on the lesson anymore, we're taking that and we're turning it into a supplemental part of the course. So using that tool that they're already familiar with to become a hub for communication and for engagement. So just keep that in mind as we go through these next few tools. Evan, you want to start us off on the Coursewide discussion?
Yeah. I've talked about this a couple of times, but it's obviously something that I think is super valuable, and I've seen work at several schools at this point. Is the idea of like course-wide discussions. So being able to foster that within a course, and so the way CourseKey is set up, like Alex was talking about, each course will have its own discussion, and so students will have the ability to open up that course, know what they're discussing, know who they should be discussing things with, and then foster that communication. And so um, a place where they can go and discuss things outside of the standard uh, bookwork or synchronous learning, if that's what it is, which obviously is a lot of discussion on the topics, the course material, but setting up a chat like this where they can talk about this after hours, they can share additional information, they can debate on certain topics, they can ask questions of each other, and one, use it from an educational aspect. I think that's really powerful. There's a lot of ways that like Alex and I bounce ideas off of each other throughout the workday and work on different projects together from different departments within CourseKey. But from an educational standpoint, I mean, you've got that opportunity to say, I don't understand this. Can anyone explain this to me better? And they might share some supplemental information that is really helpful. Videos, articles they've found that tie back to things that may have been discussed in the course but don't show up in the book material. And the second piece of that is you really start to build those relationships, and you understand these are the people in the class. These are groups of people that I've helped or have helped me, and could be places that you start to foster those relationships that last throughout the program, but then also into the future once you're out in the workforce and starting to work on sort of to look for jobs, move between jobs, whatever it happens to be. But you start to build that network, and so we can foster that while the course is still ongoing in ways that can be pretty tricky if things remain too fragmented from a communication standpoint.
Yeah. And another way that we've seen instructors utilize the course-wide discussion is for announcements and updates and reminders too. So we've really seen a wide variety of things that instructors use this platform for. So it can be anything from, hey, students, there's a career fair from noon to 3 today, like make sure you go check it out. Or even an announcement about the course itself, a reminder that that you have an exam tomorrow, or that this due date is coming up, or even updates just about, hey class, I'm going to be 2 minutes late. Just hold tight till I get there. Things like that. And the last bullet here, supplemental material, as Evan was saying, where students can share different pieces of collateral with each other. The instructor can do that too. So once a class is that the live session is finished and everyone's at home, or not working on school material, and the instructor comes across an article that relates really well back to the course material, then he or she can post that into the class discussion and share it instantly with all the students enrolled and say, hey, like, here's something I found. We can talk about it tomorrow. Just wanted to share with you guys. And yeah, similar to the course-wide discussions, the instructors can also use this tool to moderate debates in class. So they can say, okay, like here's our question. I want everyone to talk about the different sides and debate the material. Anything else you want to add here, Evan?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think it's just fostering that discussion, right? Things that you lose, things that the hallway conversations after class or before class, where you're talking about various things that maybe you want additional clarity or context on that we're not getting at this point. I think a lot of businesses have found ways to start fostering that, but I think consolidating that communication in a place where students and instructors can access that very easily and very regularly goes a long way in rebuilding that for them.
Yeah, and there is one thing I forgot to mention here is that, I mean, when any of us have been in school, we either know a student like this or we were that student. I know it was me. I didn't like to stand up in front of the entire class and share my opinion or share my voice. But a lot of partner institutions have seen that they get engagement from each of their students. And so it really provides every student with a voice and the opportunity to participate. And you might hear from those students who normally wouldn't hear from as much in on-ground courses. All right, so we'll move on to the second feature here, which is the one-to-one instructor inbox, which is basically a direct channel that students can use to contact their instructor. And this goes back to the point about email, where a student might want to contact their instructor, but either one, they don't hit send on the message because they think, oh, I could maybe go find a classmate who can answer this for me, or I don't want to waste my instructor's time. And that's not what we want them to think. Or they might have sent it and then their instructor didn't see it. It was lost in a weed of emails, lost in the weeds, and they never got confirmation back that the instructor saw it. So with this tool, you can see on the right side here with the message instructor window, the student can choose a topic or a subject. They can type their message into the text box there, even add a file, maybe a screenshot, and then they can send it off to their instructor, and their instructor has one place where they can see all the communication with their students that are enrolled. So it's really an easy way for them to keep tabs on their communication with their students and make sure that they don't miss anything. You want to add anything here, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like consolidating this is really powerful. Removing the fragmentation of that communication. Like, I think that's the biggest reason things get missed, and I think that's the biggest reason that communication breaks down. So putting this all in one place, again, I'm a big proponent of it. I prefer to work that way, and I would prefer to learn that way in school. So, however we can consolidate this kind of stuff and make it easily accessible, I think is super valuable for students as they kind of embark on this new learning environment that we're all learning on the fly.
Right. And a small anecdote here is we had one instructor start using this tool, and at the beginning of their program, they told their students, "Hey, I want to hear from you. I want to learn about you, so that we can get to know each other better. Definitely take advantage of this channel." And she said that by the end of it, she was knowing more about students than even she thought she was going to learn, and or hear from them as frequently as she did. So I think we probably are in agreement that we'd rather have students overusing these channels to speak with their instructors than underusing it, and really make sure that they feel comfortable communicating with their instructor and bringing up any issues that they might have. Okay, so both of these tools together are just a small part of the way that we're creating a digital learning community at these institutions, and really keeping students connected with each other and their instructor at all times. So especially with the pandemic and having students being forced to move to remote learning or distance learning, we're keeping them from feeling isolated. So we want them to stay connected with each other and connected with their instructor, and keep all the barriers for communication eliminated. We want anyone to be able to chime in at any point. So there's that one. And then Evan, this is basically what you've been saying.
Yeah, a couple of things that I've been harping on, which obviously are things that I think are quite valuable. But consolidating that communication into one place, it's great for students, it's great for staff, but also from an admin perspective, it's fewer systems to manage, it's fewer places to have to pull data from, it's fewer places to have to send information out to those that need to receive it, and it makes that simpler and streamlines that whole process across the whole school, from staff to instructor to student. So, I mean, putting this here and breaking it up by course so they know exactly where to look for information on nursing courses or automotive courses, depending on what they're enrolled in. They'll It'll be a very simple way for them to go ahead and access that, rather than an email inbox that's got information from every course they're enrolled in at the same time, plus school bulletins, memos that go out to the wider audience. So just, I mean, being able to add that, um, or remove those layers rather. So add the one system that actually removes all of those other layers that cover things up and maybe create those cracks that messaging can slip through. So consolidating it is a big improvement from what we've seen and what we've heard over the last year.
Yeah. And giving each student a voice from their pocket, and really the opportunity to engage and communicate with their peers, to empower them, to make sure that they feel part of their course and that they're not dealing with any questions where they don't know how to answer them. We want them to feel resourceful and not hesitate to reach out to their peers and use them as a resource, or to contact their instructor. And all of these together, creating that digital learning community and really empowering students is contributes to a world-class learning experience, which is what CourseKey wants to help these institutions deliver to their students. And the way to do that is using modern tools and really exhausting all options when it comes to facilitating communication and engagement in class. Sorry, online and blended programs. Okay, so that's the extent of our presentation, and we want to open it up to our audience and really give you the chance to ask any questions to either me or Evan at this time. So I saw that we had one or two come in. To the rest of our audience, definitely feel free to submit any questions. We'll start with this one, Evan, and I'll throw it over to you. It says, can a school use this tool to reach out to every student at the campus, not just those enrolled in a single course?
Yeah, we've actually seen a few schools kind of enroll. And if you're not familiar with CourseKey, students are enrolled in a course just like they would be in your SIS or your LMS. So that will look very similar. But what we've seen some schools do as they've moved toward more online learning or blended learning is sometimes set up a global course where they can register all the students or large groups of students that may need to get information shared with them on a regular basis. And so they can send out that information to hundreds or potentially thousands of students at the same time if they're all enrolled in that, say, global communications course. So you can do that. You certainly can do that. And we're continuing to iterate on what the communication systems look like and the capabilities are within CourseKey. So that will continue to improve and grow in the future.
Great, thank you. Second question here is there a student-to-student direct message function on CourseKey?
Right now, there's not a student to student direct message in the same way that you would have like text messaging, but it's something that has been talked about. So I know that our product team is thinking about ways that students could continue to use this to augment the education process, both inside and outside of class. And I mean, those are the kind of things that we're thinking about and trying to better understand how schools or students would use that. So certainly something that I know is being discussed, and would love to hear more about it if that's something that a school feels like their students would benefit from.
Right. Okay, thank you for submitting your questions. To our participants, we'll give another 10-15 seconds to get any last minute questions in here. Take a sip of coffee. Okay, that might have been the extent of the questions then. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we really want to hear from you and help you improve the communication in your blended and online courses. The best way for us to do that is to chat with you a little bit, and by either booking a demo on our website, or you can book a demo by emailing Evan directly, and he'll set you up there. Or there's a post-webinar survey where you can indicate that you'd like to see a demo, and we will set that up for you. Anything you want to wrap up with, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I know we covered a few things on this call, but certainly happy to dive deeper into any of these and all the other functionality that CourseKey offers on a one-to-one basis. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to chat with you and show you what we've got going on over here and see if there's ways that we can maybe help you guys accomplish some of your goals in 2021.
Definitely. And we got one message that said, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Thanks for spending a bit of your day with us here to learn from us, and hopefully this provided some value to you. We look forward to seeing everyone at future events, and thanks, Evan, for hopping on the call with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, have a great day, everybody.